Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone. Um, so, as was introduced, Ravi Patel over at PwC. Just as a little bit of a background, my focus is mainly on the media, ad tech, martech practice at PwC. But I'm excited. I'm excited to spend some time with Matt to talk a little bit about the future and what's happening in marketing organizations and what the brands of tomorrow really look like. So just to start off, I think it'd be good to get some background on you, on your journey, your experience. It's been very interesting when we spoke earlier, so let's share it.
Sure. Journey's a nice way to put it. So I've been at J&J/Kenvue. If you don't know what Kenvue is, you have a lot in common with my mother, who does not know where I work anymore. But we are former J&J consumer. We spun off about 6 months ago. So I've been with the organization for about 17 plus years, started out in finance. I don't do that anymore, clearly, but spent a lot of time in brand management, moved into digital, back to brand, and now I lead our integrated media team.
You know, you've had a lot of different stops along the way on that side, right? So, like, how have the different roles, maybe you can tell us some bits about them, because as we kind of lay that foundation, talk about how that impacts the future. Can you tell us how that's impacting your current role as well?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of different jobs, and even today, I draw back on my experience doing finance in the pharmaceutical sector. It all is relevant, and it's what I think is so important for marketers today is to have that diverse experience set, because you have to be able to put yourself in different people's shoes, be able to look at problems from different ways, because the world is changing so often. And the only way to really approach uncertainty is to really have some diverse background to draw on and think about, is there a pattern here? Is there something an experience in my past that I can draw on? And what I do today with media touches on a lot of those things. We are delivering sales for our business, so understanding the P&L is incredibly important. What we do is driving our brand messages, so understanding core marketing, brand strategy, creative is a critical element of what we do inside of media. And then now with the media side of things, understanding the technology, the different tools we can use, different partners we work with, really all that together is how I'm able to do my job. And you really have to understand all those different stops along the way to be able to effectively do that.
Or do you stay sane?
I don't know if I can say that in a public forum, but no, you have to be willing to be in a little bit of the crazy, I would say, because the world does change every day. I mean, there are new media capabilities that get announced literally every day, new retail media networks that we are thinking about, new data challenges, opportunities, all of that happens. It's just at such a rapid pace that you have to sort of sign up for the uncertainty and be comfortable with not knowing. I very rarely have a definitive right answer, but I like to have a way to approach it, a framework to lean on, and have a best approach so that our team can try, learn, and adapt.
You know, it's interesting because if you look back just 15 years ago in our ecosystem, it was a lot easier. You knew what you were getting. It was a simpler supply chain, as we like to say.
Yep.
But you have experience from the J&J standpoint on the brand side, and then now as part of your current role, you're also doing a lot of retail media side. Sales is very important, obviously, to the bottom line. What are some of the challenges that you've kind of noticed, across it all, as you're kind of seeing it right now, putting your brand hat on as well?
Yeah, I mean, from a brand perspective first, I think one of the biggest challenges is really figuring out how we break through with consumers. They have more choices than ever. They have all of the control. It is too easy to swipe, click out, pick different products to buy, go to a different retail, whatever. It is way too easy. So you have to understand that and really, I always tell people the first rule of creative development is nobody cares. We're in the business of interrupting people more times than not. So, no one's as excited about your creative than you and your mom. So how do you do it in such a way that is going to connect, if only briefly, and let someone know what your brand is about? And that's just harder and harder every single day because there's so much control in the consumer's hands. That, I think, is the biggest challenge for brands on the brand side of things. When I look at overall media, retail media is a huge challenge, huge opportunity, but that has evolved so fast. I mean, if you go back, I don't know the date, I should know the data, this is called not being prepared. But 3-4 years ago, I mean, it's probably a tenth of the size it is today, something like that. And it is growing rapidly. And I saw a stat that of the retailers that don't have media networks, I think 90% of them plan on launching one. So it's going to continue to evolve and grow as we go forward. That has grown up so fast. It's kind of like a city that boomed, but the infrastructure wasn't there. Thinking about Atlanta, Nashville, places like that. They grew so fast that didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it initially, and it had to be supported kind of after the fact. That's kind of how I think about retail media, where it's grown so fast. The teams that were managing it were thinking about it more as a trade tool, where today they're turning into sophisticated media partners for us. So how we bring that together, it changes the relationship with the retailer, it changes how we look at our holistic media strategy, and it's happened super quickly.
Retail media evolution's definitely been fast and intense, and it's taken away from the trade side of things. Media in itself has also kind of grown in the last 5 years alone, just how fragmented it's become. You said consumers, and we talk about getting closer and closer to consumers. What are some of the things, as you kind of think about the marketing org today, and you think about the marketing org of the future, that you're thinking through and you're thinking about doing in order to get closer to consumers? Because consumers change on a whim now, right? I think of it like we have the tension of a TikTok video these days. I think 8-10 seconds, and then suddenly we change. So,
yeah, I mean, this is sort of, this may sound basic, but you have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to be consumer-centric. And increasingly that is understanding they have choices, they have short attention spans, they're inherently disloyal to brands. That's a real thing we like to talk about, loyalty. I'm not sure if I'm blowing anyone up here, but consumers are inherently disloyal. You buy a lot of different brands, so you're going to bounce around, and you have to be able to connect in those moments to help hopefully tip the scale in your favor and get them to make a purchase decision when they have the shelf. But how we do that is just getting harder and harder. And I think increasingly, you have to think about the entire consumer journey. You often see articles about how maybe the purchase funnel is broken or it's upside down. I actually don't think that's true. I just think everyone has a different purchase funnel depending on the category and the moment they're in. You might be purchasing something that's super high consideration, you care a lot about. You love video games and you're buying a new TV, you're going to research it, you're going to watch YouTube videos, you're going to go down a traditional purchase funnel. A lot more we're seeing, especially with younger generations, is they're buying and going back to awareness and consideration. They'll buy, have a good experience with the product, and then go back to see if they want to buy more. So you have to be ready to meet your consumer wherever they are and understand that the purchase funnel is, I think, different on an individual basis, and that just puts more pressure on your overall consumer experience, be it your own properties, your CRM, your media, your packaging, your product. It all has to work together more than ever.
And so basically, a lot of the touch points have just gotten more complicated in a certain degree. So when you think of what was a couple of years ago in your marketing org and what is today, can you tell a little bit about that and how it's changed?
Yeah, so if you go back about 3 years, we had a much more traditional structure and organization. And I sat on the brand side of things. We had brand teams that owned basically everything from media, product development, you name it, traditional marketing, we had that. And then we had different teams that owned different capabilities, and we partnered with finance, supply chain, kind of a traditional setup. Over the last 3 years, what's happened is we've really evolved to think about what are the things that we need to do to be competitive going forward, and where do we need to put some specific attention? Because having somebody update your digital shelf as 5% of their side hustle is not good enough. We know that. We know that having somebody spend an hour a week on a status call with their media agency to manage tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of investment is not good enough, given how dynamic the marketplace is, how quickly we have to make decisions. It takes people and it takes dedicated attention. And that's what we've moved towards. So move from that more traditional structure where I sat in that seat, so I can say it. I think I'm relatively competent in media, but I spent about 10% of my time when I was leading our baby marketing organization thinking about media. I was worried about Walmart and packaging and my P&L and who's mad at us this week or whatever. Now I can fully dedicate myself, and the journey we've been on is really figuring out what those ingredients look like. We started out with my team. This is my third job in 3 years and third organization I've built in 3 years, so I'm tired, as you can tell. But we started with media and digital shelf. It's like these are two areas we need to really focus in on to win. In 2021 was kind of when we did that. Then we added in the rest of the digital experience with websites and CRM. To my earlier point, this all has to work together. And now we've gone to a place where I lead an integrated media team, bringing in retail media capabilities, audience data, all those different things under one team to really work together holistically. And then we have a team who's doing the same with our experience and things like that, because it does take people. And that's a huge evolution, and it takes time. But we had to go through those steps to really figure out what's working and what's not, to really adapt for the next step.
And as you said, it takes time, so we've been at it for 3 years, right? The other piece is you pushed on people, and I think people is a big component, especially as time goes on. We'll talk a few topics around tools and everything like that, and the impact on people. But how are you going about getting the right people? That's the hard part in our
Sure is.
Agility, talent, that stuff is.
Yeah, I have some of the right people out there, a couple of my friends there. It's a challenge. I mean, when we built the team back in 2021, we hired a lot of net new people because we didn't have the resources in-house.
Inside or outside? Internal or external?
External. We probably hired 80% external. And it wasn't because we necessarily wanted to, but we hadn't built those capabilities in-house. We had some folks that were in-house that were great, but most people weren't working on these things. And it wasn't that they couldn't learn. We've moved a lot of people into those roles to help develop and build our own pipeline. But it took an external effort initially, and honestly, it was hard because I don't know that anyone's really doing this necessarily, or it's so new, it's not like you're going to find a 10-year veteran of X. Like, that doesn't really exist.
If it was easy, everyone would do it, right?
That's it.
How about, getting the budget service, getting the people? A lot of times, in what I've seen from my experience and other clients, is it's very hard to get net new. It's very hard for change management. Can you, some of the brands sitting here, and some of our agency partners sitting here, and they experience the same thing. So it'd be great to get your views on that.
That's where data matters, and it can't just be hopes and dreams. This is going to help us be more effective, drive more sales, be more profitable, rely less on an external partner or agency. You might in-house something, but you have to be able to quantify the impact of what these roles are. You can't just bring a bunch of people in and get excited and do digital stuff. That's not a thing. You have to be able to show that we are actually improving ROIs. We're actually moving faster, able to make decisions better. We are improving conversion rates on our PDPs. Whatever it is, to quantify that and make a business case. And that's actually what happened. Is we first said, this is what we think the opportunity looks like. If we can affect our media by this much, it's worth X. Or if we can improve conversions by this much, it's worth Y. Now, thank God we were right, or else I would not be sitting here with this discussion. But with a lot of these things, it's a lot of low-hanging fruit. But you don't know it till you try it. And I think that's why you see a 3-year journey on this, is we didn't go all the way to where we are in one shot. We had to really pilot and prove and say, this is working, now let's evolve it to the next step. This is working, let's evolve it to the next step. And that's really been the journey over the last 3 years, is building it while proving value and saying, here's actually where the next opportunity is.
Not many brands didn't have the unique situation you did, right, when you went on this journey. The whole spin-off of Kenvue. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of played a role into this? If not, how it did it?
We started this before any of this was announced, and I found out the same day you guys all did, just to be transparent. Unless you're about 4 people, we all found out on the same day. So this all got kicked off, I would say, about 1.5 years before the spinoff was announced. The role it played, I would say, is that it was really an accelerant, or maybe the additional case for change, but it wasn't the reason why we did it. I think we'd end up in a pretty darn similar spot had we spun or not. But it really was like, hey, if we're going to be a competitive pure play CPG company, these are things we really have to invest in. So I think it just gave us confidence that the things we were doing had to be invested in and prioritized. But similar, I mean, we kicked this off during COVID, and the discussions were how do we, not just ride the wave of this e-com bonanza, but how do you win and step change? And I think it's similar to that where, there's a lot of discussion of we advanced 10 years in 10 weeks, and as we know now, I don't think that's necessarily true. But what it did do was I think it accelerated people's thinking by 10 years because it got everyone on this shared consciousness of what matters and where is this going to create the case for change and advance this to where we are. So I think it's similar to how COVID created that bit of shared understanding of where the world was going, even if it wasn't the direct accelerant.
But yeah, that makes sense on that side. But the fact that you were able to keep it going because, I'm sure it's a lot different then than it was now and have to re-justify the business case and
for sure.
kind of keep pushing that.
For sure. I mean, we're operating inside of an enormous amount of change. I mean, we're a new company for 5 months, 6 months, something like that. So there's a lot happening outside of kind of what we're talking about here today. So that's an added element of challenge that I think we deal with, and that's all the more important that we are partnering, listening, being really hyper tuned into what the organizational priorities are, so we're not off marching and saying, well, this is what media needs to do, but no, like how do we need to operate in a way that's going to live into the Kenvue strategies and values and what we deem to be our critical success factors.
We spoke about the people side of things when I think about the marketing org, and it's very important to have partners in-house as well as outside that kind of help you think through what's going to happen next and how do we kind of get it. I want to talk a little bit about data and technology and how you're viewing that as you think about the future of the marketing organization. Whether it's in-housing contracts or it's having access to your own data, like how are you thinking those emerging trends?
That's going to be a huge part of it, and those tools are part of those enablers. So we talked about the people, as you said. The technology helps us work faster, more efficiently, have more access or be able to connect the pipes on what we're doing, have shared analytics so we're all looking at, people aren't spending hours and hours and hours to create charts that may or may not be consistent with the rest of the organization. Who's ever done that? So those things are really productivity sort of tools. I think the way it's going to be looked at going forward, though, is more of a non-working expense, where it's been predominantly we think about non-working, you think about creative. But I think if you overlay technology and data to that, of like how do you actually go beyond just that creative process and what you're investing behind the non-working media, data and technology is going to be right behind that as a critical piece of that because it's table stakes now. We know that.
It goes into, you said non-working and working. I think historically and still today, a lot of people think about how do I maximize my working media. For every dollar I put in, I want to see as much as possible going into media and not anything else. Data and technology and this entire consumer change and the amount of touch points has changed that. How are you viewing like non-working now in terms of, is it okay to have a little bit more go to non-working into these kind of different areas because you know that it might impact it, whether good or bad in other ways? And how are you kind of justifying it to your finance teams and to your higher-ups?
To put it simply, you have to do the math. If I can show that if I invest an extra $1 million in some sort of technology that's going to yield more than $1 million of better outcomes, we should do it. And I think it's easy to be myopic and think that working is maximize, which, by the way, we all do that. Can't be nothing. You can't, advertise the 13 people. But within reason, how do you balance that? And it takes the analytics. What's the business case? Measuring could be similar to what we talked about earlier. Do you test into it? Do you scale it over time? But there are real situations. I mean, it's easy to say, working media is tangible. Your leadership sees it on the evening news and the billboards they drive past as they go return to office gleefully. Like all of those things are real and you hear about that. Non-working sort of behind the scenes. So I think it's really important as you invest in those things, you're also bringing forward the learning so people understand why you're doing it because it's so easy to cut. Every time we go through any sort of budget exercise, the first thing you talk about is what non-working can we cut? Protect the working media. That may end up screwing you long term, and you may be making a very short-term decision that could yield a very negative outcome, but it's easy. So I think it's really imperative that you're assigning value to whatever you're doing, creative, technology, data, otherwise, to understand why you're making that investment.
There's always, whenever I talk to a lot of marketers and media leaders, a lot of times it's like, hey, I have media budgets. They need to be spent, ideally more to working media. How are you viewing things? Because how you can spend $1 today is a lot different than what it was even 5 years ago in terms of you don't need to spend that entire dollar to get the same effectiveness and efficiency as you once did. So are you spending the entire dollar?
We're spending it the way it's going to drive the best outcome. And that may look a lot of different ways. It may or may not be on the channels they want to be on. It may or may not be in the exact allocation, but that's where the data matters. And you have to do the math. You have to understand. And it's a sophisticated process. There is an art to this. There is an element of, if you optimize against pure ROI, you'll create a lot of bad behaviors. You'll probably narrow your audience, you'll never grow your household penetration, you won't support new products. Those are bad things. So you have to have a strategic lens to all this, but at the same time, we have access to a lot of great data and analytics, and we should be able to make more sophisticated choices than, I have $1, go make it work for me. There may be a better way to invest those funds.
The biggest thing that's I think is going to happen in the next few years, and the audience would love to hear your take on this. AI and automation is going to replace us all. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think the impact of AI and automation is going to be, and how really brands should be viewing that going forward? Because you have a good perspective on it as well.
I don't think it's going to replace us all. I think it's going to be a tool, and it's going to be a critical skill for all of us to understand. And it has a lot of shapes and sizes, but we're already seeing some really interesting applications with creative and reducing complexity, helping with versioning. There's Amazon made an announcement a couple of weeks ago around adding backgrounds to their products for the PDPs. That's going to level the playing field for people running their e-com businesses and whatnot. That's a tool. It's a productivity tool. It's going to help make analytics faster. It'll probably remove some non-value-added work that shouldn't have been invested in to begin with. But you still need humans. You're still marketing to people at the end of the day. So I think the skill that's going to be more important is strategy, ultimately, for marketers, understanding that. AI will be a tool to help you best activate against that strategy. But AI is only as good as what's been put into it, and it's backwards looking. AI will never tell you what, it can be generative, it can sort of tell you these things, but realistically, it's only as good as what it's done. So if you're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, how on earth is it going to do it?
And that's where the entire data complexity mappings, all that stuff is so important, because if you don't fix those things going forward, which is part of the non-working, you can't really utilize the automations and the AI that you kind of think would take on your day-to-day processes so that you can focus more on the strategic and creative side of things. So it's definitely interesting, and I like that perspective because I agree with you that it's a tool. It's just something in your tool belt that you utilize as you need to. But what do you see as the emerging trends in your organization the next few years? What are you focused on that side? Is it more technology? Is it more people? Is it in between?
Yes, it's all those things. I think it's hard to say because the trends change so often. So I think we have to continue to evolve. We have to test and adapt into what 2024 and 2025 brings us. Data's undoubtedly going to be something we have to pay close attention to. You've heard cookie deprecation 13 times today already, and it's only noon. That's going to be something that matters in 2024. But I think more than anything, it's managing complexity with more media channels, more data sets, more different ways to activate on channels. If you're on TikTok, do you start a shop? Do you do the traditional feed ads, whatever? There's more and more choices. You can't do everything, you should do everything. So I think really the thing to be able to do going forward is to manage complexity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things I appreciate is no one really knows what's going to happen in a few years from now. COVID kind of the entire world still for a little bit, changed every way dynamically how we kind of operate and things that happen afterwards. So I think we're getting to the time, and I do want to open it up for questions, but I do have one more. A lot of peers here, let's say they're interested in kind of going towards this and building a more holistic org, especially an org that kind of utilizes innovation, that uses people. What advice would you have to them? Like, it's hard. How do you kind of stay on track? Because there's a lot of downs until you get to the ups. It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah, I always tell people that when you're doing this type of stuff, there's going to be more tough days than easy days. That's true. I think a lot of us can appreciate that. But being anchored in why you're doing it, what your strategy is, what you're trying to achieve is critical. You can't just do it to do it because it sounds fun. You will burn out and you won't last very long. So be excited about what you're doing. And I think be open. Be ready to be wrong. Be ready for change. Be ready, have strong opinions loosely held, I would say. That's a really, I think, important way to think about it. You should have a perspective, but be ready to be either proven wrong or have some new technology or information come into the fold that gives you a perspective that you may want to change your approach quickly. That happens all the time.
So, well, thank you, Matt. That was a lot there. But I do want to open it up to the audience for questions as well.
I saw the results of a survey that was conducted recently with chief marketing officers about the ownership of marketing technology, and the fact that it seems like the trend is that marketing functions are losing ownership and marketing technology is moving towards IT ownership. I'm wondering, as we talk about building the marketing organization, if you're seeing that, if you see that as a pro or a con. Obviously there are pros and cons to both, but what you're dealing with as it relates to that.
Great question. So my boss actually used to lead our IT organization for North America. So we've blended a lot of this because marketing and technology more and more go hand in hand. And I work extremely closely with our technology team. So we have different folks who own different parts of it, and more technology-minded folks may own some of that actual technology. However, it's in partnership with my team, and like I said, my boss literally used to lead that team and now has media under him as well. So we've really combined them. It's not that it's losing or moving one from the other, but I would say bringing them together. I think it's okay. It's okay to have people that specialize, but you have to be oriented in the organization in a way that you're not creating solutions looking for problems. We need to talk and say, I need this, or this is what's going on. How can we build a solution that's going to help us activate more effectively? That's super critical. So I think it's sort of in between them. We have them separate, but kind of.
Do we have time for another?
Just at about time, but thank
That's a no.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt and Ravi. Glad AI is not going to replace us all, so we're safe for at least the future.